Ciao, and welcome to the Frontier Space Podcast, a dialogue about how space technology and exploration are transforming our solar system. Welcome to the Frontier Space Podcast.
Thank you. Today, we are going to discuss acoustic analysis of laser-induced graphene as a quality control technique for mass production of laser-induced graphene films. So a little bit about my academic background. During my undergraduate, I was a chemistry major, and I did my specialization in theoretical chemistry. During that time, I worked in the lab of Professor James Torr. Professor Torr's research group developed this technique where basically by scanning a laser across the surface of a material, you can form films of this porous graphene foam as well as these fibers. So previously, I was working on making laser-induced graphene air filters, and I noticed that a specific type of sound was produced when the laser-induced graphene air filter came out the correct way. Fast forward, during that summer, my brother came over for an internship as well. And basically, since he had more background in processing signals and things of that sort, he decided to take the sounds and analyze them using a computer. Now, the thing is that computers with a microphone can hear a lot of frequencies and also have much better resolution than the human ear has. So not only was he able to show that the graphene that I was hearing when the filter came out correctly was the right stuff from my perspective, but he was able to show that different sounds actually corresponded to different products being formed, and different products have different morphologies as well as different spectral characteristics. And that is the basis of this paper. So this technology is primarily useful as of now for large scale quality control. For example, if we're making meter square scale sizes of laser-induced graphene, you don't want to have to characterize it by SEM or Raman. Even though SEM and Raman are state-of-the-art techniques, they get very, very good information about a very small area. But the thing about it is that you're only seeing the area being sampled, so you risk the chance of missing some sort of defect, and likewise, the throughputs are quite low. With this technique, we are now able to monitor the entire process from start to finish. So one can envision that an acoustic analysis technique can be coded and automatically run as the large area is being formed. And because we demonstrated locality as well as global characteristics, what this proves is that we are able to now analyze every single point of laser-induced graphene as it is being formed. Now, this is a very powerful technique because looking at SEM and Raman, the maximum that they could probably analyze in one sitting is probably on the order of maybe a millimeter maximum. But the thing about it is that this allows you to cover meters squared, like entire samples. So that means that this is effectively a million times scale up in the throughput and in the rate of our analysis and in the or capabilities to know what we are forming at every single point, at every single moment in every single sample that we are forming.
So it's quite profound, and congratulations to you and your team and brother. I noticed, so you guys essentially, you just took this microphone and attached it to this $31 microphone from Amazon and attached it to the laser writing head, and then ran, this acoustic analysis and signal processing. So you guys mentioned in your paper that there's a certain aerial energy dosage with the laser that drove the carbonization or the removal of carbon atoms from the material, and so that created oscillated at certain audible frequencies and sounds. I was reading over your paper here. I got a whole lot of questions for you.
Go for it.
I was wondering, it'd be great if you could, share more and lead to more about the benefits of this capability. of the acoustic real-time analysis. I don't know, how this really changes the game in terms of the material synthesis and properties we'd like to develop in various applications. Yes.
Well, so basically laser-induced graphene, depending on how you're forming it, has many different properties. For example, previously we were able to show that by varying the laser parameters, by varying the conditions under which we laser, we get very different properties. So here we are able to now use sounds to either analyze what is being formed there, or as well as make sure that if we want a specific product, to ensure that the product is actually what we want to form at that location. So the thing about it is that for applications such as electrocatalysts, or for battery electrodes, or for microsupercapacitors and things of that sort, you want specific morphologies of laser-reduced graphene to form. As laser-reduced graphene ranges from a porous film all the way up to a fiber attached to the polyimide substrate. So depending on what application you're looking for, you want different morphologies and therefore different properties. So here we can basically see, okay, so this sound corresponds to this property. So it basically tells us that the sounds contain information regarding what we are forming. And those things that we are forming either are targeted towards a specific application where we are trying to control the morphology, or when we are just trying to see what is actually being formed under these conditions. And the sounds can also help us guide or search in that process.
And with your background in chemistry there, you guys mentioned we could fine tune the material properties, and very curious about if it's a similar process toward increasing each material property during synthesis, whether it's laser-induced graphene or even another method of the interaction between two substances, whether we want to increase the mechanical, the structural, electric or magnetic properties. I feel like there's so much potential here with this audio analysis.
Yeah, because like many things emit sounds. It's just that either A, we don't notice it, or B, our ears don't pick it up, either because it is sufficiently quiet that we can't hear it, or it is in a frequency range that we cannot hear. So the thing about it is that the power of computers and microphones is that they can pick up things in a far more sensitive manner than our ears can. So in like various other types of processing techniques, there's sounds. Like, in any sort of machinery running, there's sounds. In any sort of mechanical process, well, you hear the machine grinding away, but there's also other precise frequencies that are there, or precise bands of frequencies that you want to look at. So what happens is that using this type of technique, what we can basically do is that not only can we monitor, like, for example, materials processing, but we can monitor processes themselves. For example, like if I'm printing a piece of paper, I can hear if the paper jams in my printer. Those types of concepts where we are linking this additional channel where we're not only looking, but we have like an additional channel of feedback. And this additional channel of feedback can then be interpreted in a computer almost as if like we are interpreting like what we're seeing. Well, that's exactly what's happening because the computer is generating these waveforms that we are now looking at. So it's like having another sense on top of what our human audio capabilities can detect.
Well said. Yeah, we're the humans currently we're kind of limited to this audible range of 20 to 20,000 hertz, and it's just like if we could hear up to 100,000 hertz, how might our world be? What might be different?
Well, yeah, there's low frequency ranges and there's high frequency ranges. We cannot hear either of them. Well, if we can hear high frequency or low frequency, then I would suppose our world would be very noisy. Because and there's a reason why we have that narrow window, and it's because, well, most of the sounds that are relevant to us are in that narrow window. Because like, I mean, we also have other animals that can hear higher frequencies, sure, but like, I mean, we cannot hear like a rat speak to us, or well, we can hear some of those things that the rat is trying to say to us, but they can make sounds that we cannot hear, and they can hear sounds that we cannot, you know, we cannot detect, or you know. So yeah, I would think that if we can actually hear that, we would perceive it to be very noisy. Now, the good thing about computers is that computers can do signal processing, and also computers can selectively denoise and do certain procedures to be able to analyze the signal coming in across a very, very broad range of spectral frequencies. By the way, a lot of the things that matter to us happen at very high frequencies as well as low frequencies. For example, like when machinery is running, you have high frequency noises as well as low frequency noises being generated at the same time. And not all of those tell us something, but we can know that in that process, there's very likely some sound that actually does give us some information as to what is going on. Or during a material transformation process, there might be some sort of sound that is emitted somewhere that we can't hear it, but that sound contains valuable information regarding what is happening.
Yes. I was wondering if you could walk us through this acoustic analysis process in the mathematics you guys did.
So basically, the outline is in figure 3. Basically, what happened is that to begin with, we plotted them as spectrograms, because the first thing that we want to do is that we want to see is like, is there actually anything happening? And then what happens is that we look and they're like, oh, there's something happening. Well, if there is something happening, let's try to extract information out of it. Is there actually information in there? And therefore, what we did is this Fourier transform. This Fourier transform, what it does is that it separates these sounds into multiple different frequencies. It basically takes the sounds and breaks it into the components. Like at this frequency, there's this amount of power, and at this different frequency, there's this amount of power. So that's what the Fourier transform does. And then afterwards, what we did is this this denoising procedure. Basically, this is a background subtraction and a metric of how intense the sound is relative to background noise. So if there is increased intensity relative to background noise, that means that there's something there that is not in the noise, right? So or signal should be in theory, or signal should be in the component that is not in the noise. And then what we did is, inspired by NMR analysis, we did integral analysis, and as well as second integral analysis, which basically tells us like how much total amount of power is there, as well as what's the relative distribution of the power, and from the low frequency regime, high frequency regime, as well as the concavity of the characteristics. So then, combined using these two together, we were able to predict features of the Raman spectrum. And the Raman spectrum, basically, it gives us information about the local properties, like really nanostructural properties of the atoms themselves and their surroundings. So by doing so, we were able to show that the sounds contain information about the atoms or arrangements in the solid, as well as the microstructural characteristics given the morphology evolution shown on the SEM images. So that is basically what the procedure does overall.
Wonderful. Yeah, I was looking here. Just trying to understand the mathematics you guys did with the second integral of the Fourier transform to from the 2 hertz to the 3rd harmonic frequency, but more, I guess more importantly, why finding the harmonic frequencies was important.
Well, like, I mean, the thing about it is that basically what those peaks there represent is that there's a large amount of energy relaxation that is happening, and it is occurring through sound. And then that's what that represents. Like when you hear a sound signal, what that means is that the energy is being relaxed from the sample into sound. So we are taking this energy input, this laser, and then we are hitting the sample with it. And then a portion of that energy is transformed into heat, transformed into light, transformed into sound, right? So and what is happening over there is that we have this energy input that is then being converted to somewhere else. And basically that's what the peaks at the frequencies really tell us, is the energy relaxation that is happening.
And with those peaks, the energy relaxation, is that a positive or is that negative toward the material, like long-term stability?
The energy relaxation just basically means that our input energy is being converted into something else. So basically, through that process, what happens is that the input energy that we put in is just carbon dioxide laser beam, and then what comes out is, well, the relaxation then is affected by the material's properties. So effectively, the material's properties confer a certain distribution to what is coming out, the sound signal that is coming out, that then we are basically backing out by doing this analysis. So what happens is that when the laser hits a sample and it emits sound, it is affected by the local properties of the material at the point of incidence.
Awesome. It looks like the vibratory oscillations return to their equilibrium state as well, with those high peaks. So might be synonymous with a more advantageous material property and that's being observed. Was interested in the kinds of quantitative metrics that we could assess with from the Raman shift here and analysis.
Well, first I would like to talk about like advantageous materials properties, because we have this ability to adjust the material depending on our applications. Different materials are actually good for different applications. So it's not necessarily that one type of material is advantageous for all applications, but rather different materials are advantageous for different applications. And each of these different morphologies then also have a different Raman spectrum characteristics. So what we are doing is that we are focusing on the 2D peak. This is indicating the presence of graphenic carbon. So basically, depending on the 2D to G ratio, as well as the full width half maximum of the 2D peak, what is really telling us is what is the composition at that location that is being formed. So then that's what we're really analyzing. We were able to show that in our acoustic spectrum, there's information that is contained from which it is related to the 2D to G ratio as well as the 2D full width half maximum.
Thanks for explaining there. Notice so this experiment you guys did was primarily on the 2D scale, and was wondering how we could adapt this acoustic analysis on a 3D scale.
Well, actually, our research group has this process called flash Joule heating. Now, flash Joule heating enables us to cheaply convert any sort of solid carbon source into graphene, and the resulting graphene is called flash graphene. So this laser-induced graphene is a 2D film. 2D films are good for 2D applications. The laser-induced graphene has been licensed to LIGC applications. So on a 3D scale, our research group has developed flash graphene. Flash graphene has been licensed to Universal Matter. And Universal Matter, right now, that company is leading in terms of this type of technology, where we are able to cheaply convert any solid carbon source into flash graphene. So flash graphene is a way to make bulk powders, 3D scale quantities of raw material. For example, and they were able to demonstrate that they can do gram scale conversion. Now, gram scale conversion is incredibly hard, and currently we are also scaling up to kilogram scale conversion. And from there, what is happening is that we can generate bulk quantities of flash graphene. During the flash graphene process, sound is also generated, and then we are currently figuring out, well, we have already published a machine learning paper regarding machine learning for analyzing what parameters to use during the flash graphene process, but it would be advantageous for us to use acoustic analysis as well on flash graphene to be able to figure out what is being formed inside the tube at the time that we are flashing, because we also do observe that sound is being released as we are flashing the sample and converting the solid carbon source into bulk quantities of graphene powder.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm curious on the the other applications you guys mentioned here as well with this acoustic analysis. What else we'd apply this to here? You guys mentioned all sorts of exciting applications, such as applying this acoustic and signal processing for sintering, phase engineering, strain engineering, chemical vapor deposition, a lot more there.
Basically anything that emits sound, where the sound contains information regarding some sort of parameter that we are interested in, whether it be what material we are processing, whether it be, is this process going correctly, or is the machine running correctly, or is this thing like different from something else because because we know that the sound is different. So is the sound related to what is being formed? Like it's a very, very general process regarding the analysis of sounds, because sounds are everywhere. And the thing about it is that all we need to do is figure out what sounds to analyze and how to analyze it.
Yes. Yeah, and in all sorts of environments, and reactions. You guys also mentioned the ability to monitor fluids, annealing and combustion and distillation.
Yeah, because very often when fluid flows, there's some periodicity, especially when there's development of turbulence or something of that sort. Then you have these fluctuations, and these fluctuations very often, if it's interacting with some sort of solid structure, you can measure the mechanical oscillations or something of that sort, and that would give you information on what is going on in there.
Yes. Although it would appear we couldn't apply this to most of the universe, because the sound needs a medium to propagate through with atmosphere, right? And
well, you can couple it to light. If you have a light source and then there's sound, right? If you have sound and a light source, what happens is that the vibration is now coupled to light, and then on the other side, you then take the light and you transduce it into a signal.
Oh, that sounds
yeah, so you can propagate the sound signal locally that is happening over a very, very long distance using light through vacuum.
Okay, trying to wrap my head around this here. And so when we're coupling this to a photon, could we collect audible data in the vicinity of that photon, or?
No. What I mean is that if you have a structure that is moving or oscillating or vibrating, if you have a laser beam affixed to that structure, then the motion of that laser beam is going to be related to the motion of the structure that the laser beam is affixed to. Or, for example, if you have some sort of transducer of some sort, you can convert that sound signal into a signal that you can beam across very long distances.
Okay, so like a subsystem on board a satellite, right? We want to monitor the material reactions with the environment and the surface charge buildup and the radiation. And so could we potentially extract all sorts of data, audible data, and transmit that data?
Wait, what do you mean?
But I guess really like applying this, putting a microphone on board a satellite or a spacecraft and monitoring the material reactions that occur on a 2D scale and possibly 3D.
Well, you can either do like a microphone, or in areas where it's all vacuum, you can do a transducer or something of that sort, and that should pick up the vibrations, because most satellites are connected in one piece. So like, I mean, it's a solid. Solids conduct mechanical waves, and you can detect that, of course, and that might tell you something about what is going on in there.
Wonderful. All sorts of opportunity. Yeah, could hold the potential to become a critical subsystem, I think, to help understand the material reactions in the vacuum and other environments.
Well, the other thing is, like, laser-induced graphene is a very interesting space material because it is actually very light. It's essentially a carbon, the carbon foam can be formed up to densities that are aerogel-like, and basically it is a very high strength to weight material, and it's a very high surface area material, and therefore in certain space applications you would want some sort of thing like that, especially for applications such as catalysis or things like that. Laser-induced graphene is a potential material that can be used for aerospace applications.
Yes. Curious how the sounds themselves and audible vibrations would change in on Mars and elsewhere. Because I would imagine what the sounds emitted here, they fluctuate in all sorts of environments, right? And so the sounds associated with material interactions and synthesis here on Earth might be different on other planets and on the Moon and Mars and in
Of course, because, like, I mean, the atmospheric density certainly matters, as well as the atmospheric composition might also have some other effect. The thing about it is that in here, we are calibrating it to the system that we are analyzing, and I believe that is actually a very important thing, is that we calibrate it to the system that we are analyzing, and therefore, once we have it calibrated, then it is an appropriate tool for us to use in quality control applications and analysis applications, things of that sort.
Nice. Yeah, and I don't know what kind of mathematical properties there are that define how a material absorbs the mechanical shock waves.
Well, of course, like, or a signal processing scheme is only one of many signal processing schemes that you can envision to use to process this sound. The thing about it is that basically the point of this paper is to show that the sounds contain information about the material that we are synthesizing. However, like, you can envision a diverse array of all sorts of procedures that otherwise can also be used to analyze the sounds and also be used to transform the sounds into usable information, because that's what it is about. Because at the end of the day, it's about finding sounds that do have information that you want to analyze, and then transforming that sound, the raw input, into some sort of signal that or some sort of metric that you're actually interested in.
Yeah, you start to wonder, could we potentially, if there was a bridge, however many bridges here are on Earth, and all of the micro cracks that might arise and have arisen in the past, 5-10 years over time, and then listening to those cracks and as they accumulate over time.
Yeah, you can certainly hear things of that sort in concrete, and in steel it's a little bit more difficult. But what you can do is that you can also instead of passively listening, you can also excite using some sort of sound source and then collect the information from there. But acoustic analysis, like it spans like a very, very broad array of applications that can be used to monitor whether the bridge is undergoing fatigue, for example, or whether there's some sort of critical flaw that needs to be addressed. And those are very important applications of similar technologies.
And it sounds like soft materials and biological tissues and polymers that those are all capable of absorbing sounds and whereas compared to those, I would imagine that the heavier metals, right, and that have more stiffness, might be more difficult to monitor the sounds.
The frequency would be higher.
Okay.
Yeah, so therefore you need to move to transducers or something of that sort.
Okay. I was very curious how we could apply this to biological systems and the cells, both the eukaryotic and the bacterial cells, and yes.
Like, for example, in a bioreactor?
Yeah, a bioreactor, where or inside a human, inside a plant, these microorganisms everywhere.
We already do this. Like, that's the reason why the doctor takes a stethoscope and then listens to what's going on in your chest and whatever.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I was noticing, these researchers, they noted that each cell has a particular song and ensemble, and that we can monitor these biological vibrations with an atomic force microscope, but could potentially apply this and bring this as a biosensor, in vivo and or maybe 3D bioprinting too.
Well, the thing about cells is that the way that us humans try to make something stable is usually by trying to control it. Like, it must be like this value, or within these bounds. What nature does, rather, is that to stabilize things, nature uses the oscillations very frequently to stabilize something. So yeah, a lot of the natural systems contain oscillations, either chemical oscillations or mechanical oscillations. Like, these oscillations are necessary for stability.
Yeah. So the cytoplasm has a similar viscosity compared to water, and my understanding is that that sounds propagate much faster and more efficiently through liquids. How we can, when we're scuba diving, we can hear things underwater much more quickly. So
well, that's the density effect. Because the thing about it is that yeah, the density of water is many times higher than the density of air. And so the thing about it is that you mentioned 3D printing. For 3D printing, it might be possible for us to monitor what is going on, like in terms of what we are printing, as well as like the local properties of what is being printed, in terms of this type of technique. Especially like as we go to printing materials which have very different compositions, then it is certainly possible.
I'm curious if that would be a similar signal analysis method as well. But,
well, it's very hard to develop a general analysis method for a general case of what, like, I mean, and it's one of those things where being good at something necessarily demands that it is not good at something else. So what we have to do rather is pick the right analysis methods for the right signal for the right process. So
yeah, another thought that comes to mind here is, you know, we can hear over much longer distances underwater, but potentially if we put a biosensor or just some microphone underwater near coral reefs, and we listen to them dying, you know, over the years, and but potentially how we could use this to help fight climate change.
well, we can monitor the whales.
Yeah.
That's one of the things we have done in the past. Yeah.
Cool. Um, well, a few last questions here is, what kind of you know, software is out there to analyze and process this input audio data?
Well, here it's very rudimentary. So we're not using any sort of very high level software techniques. I know like Python has multiple different packages that can do similar things. And other people have written similar things in C, similar things in Fortran, etc. So in terms of software, it depends on what the software engineer wants to use, and then after that, it depends on like what user interface the user wants, and you just connect the two, and that's what you get.
Notice for the Fourier transform, you guys use Origin Pro analysis.
Yeah, because we just want to quickly see what is going on in there. Of course, like, I mean, in the actual industrial scale, very likely they will use a different software with different codes, as well as a slightly adjusted analysis procedure and things of that sort to speed up the process, and as well as make it suitable for their specific application.
Nice. I was excited to look into a lot of this vibrational analysis software, and this this one model DI from DATAQ data logger looks cheap and promising. I can put some links here in the description. The sonolithography looks quite promising as well. There are some researchers that they were able to you know, use these ultrasonic standing waves to create patterns on surfaces, and they create different patterns, and so these cells retained you know, a pattern when collagen was deposited onto this petri dish, but just by changing the phase or the frequency or duration of the sound as it's coming down onto the surface. It's interesting.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for the interview.
Yes, thank you, John. There's noticed